Thank you. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this evening's executive. I'd like to start the meeting by taking any apologies for absence, and I understand that we have Councillor Bob Fole and Councillor Barbara Denning.
That's great, Chad.
Okay, Bob Fole may be turning up late. I think his mum's being moved not too well, so we hope that she's all right there. And I understand Councillor Denning has been coming back from Southampton after having to deal with a family emergency, basically. And so we just hope them well in all of those things. So item 2 is the minutes of the 7th of November. Are you agreeable that I sign those as a true record? I move. Second, have a seconder, please. There you go. Okay. That's agreed by everybody. We'll move on. Declarations of interest. There is an item at the end, and that declarations of interest. If any member has a declaration of interest, please indicate. Item 4 is Local Government Access to Information Act of 1985. That's item 19A, appendices 5 to 8, and also 1920. Item 20, they will be dealt with at the end of the meeting. Okay, so that's all going on as normal. And now we come to item 5, which is questions from the members of public. And we've got 2 members of the public here, and we've got one written one. I'll deal with the written one first. Mark.
So we received one public question from Mrs. Thompson, who is unfortunately not able to be here tonight. So the question will be included with the and response will be included with the minutes, and she'll also be emailed a copy of her response.
Okay, thank you very much. So we've now got 2 members of the public, and that's all right. People can hear, can't they? So that's okay. That's all right. We'll share this one. So it's a question from, is it Dr. Virginia Russell? If you'd like to come forward and ask your question, please.
Do I come over here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks very much. It's a shame that I'm back here. Didn't really particularly want to return. Given that plans to sell Clifton Hill site generated significant public concern when first proposed, will you provide adequate opportunity and time for members of the public to scrutinise and comment on any new plans that are recommended?
Thank you. Okay. Consultations and decisions regarding planning have already been agreed. Should any revisions come forward to those plans, then the appropriate consultations will of course take place in accordance with our agreed procedures. So you're allowed one.
You've allowed one supplementary question based on the response provided.
But given that the short time frame that's been suggested to the resale, and we have no idea where the boundaries of the site that are being sold are, what trees will be removed, and we've already seen in the area significant loss of habitat and biodiversity, can you assure us that local people will at least have a chance to scrutinise the area that's actually being sold and comment?
Okay, there's 2 elements to the answer there. One is a planning consideration, and as I said in my first answer, the plans have already gone through the planning committee and have been agreed by the planning committee. And so if any developer was to move in on that particular part of the site, they could follow those plans. But they could say, I want to change something, and then they would have to come back through the process or seek a variation, and that would come back to the planning committee. So that the public obviously are consulted on all of that. You've then asked, are we going to consult on the sale and how we're going to sell it and what's that involved on it? And what I'm going to suggest to you is I've pulled item 19 to the front of the agenda following these questions, which I feel you will hear a lot, and I think you'll have a better understanding on how the council will deal with it. And I think you won't consider your visit here such a shame after all.
Thank you.
Now we've got a further question from Emily McIver. Would you like to come forward?
Yes, thank you. Good evening, councillors. So my question is, will members respect previous public representations on the original plans to develop the Clifton Hill site, especially calls for Exeter City Council to retain ownership of the entire site, including all green space, to protect nature and benefit residents in line with policies on climate change and biodiversity?
Thank you. Item 19 on the agenda, on tonight's agenda, will consider the future disposal of the site. However, it is for the council to determine the final decision in respect of the sale of the assets, taking all factors into consideration. And it is the right of elected members to make a different decision from that recommended if they so wish. Following the recommendations of the officers this evening, executive members may amend those recommendations following the officer's presentation on item 19. If you want a supplementary,
Yes,
you're allowed,
okay,
based
yes.
on that answer.
So, yes, I understand that councillors will decide this evening how to respond to the recommendations and the various options presented. I notice that there's a limit to the amount of financial information being made available to members of the public at this point. And I would ask councillors, please, to scrutinise all of the various options. I'm sure you will, I'm sure you have already. But I'd like to particularly ask you to keep hold of the do nothing option. It is my sense that you could decide tonight to sell the previously built on portion of the site, and you could decide tonight to sell that for residential. I can see the subtext in the council papers very clearly. There's a clear leaning towards residential rather than the council officer's recommendation. However, any sale means that you lose control of that site, and the public campaign was seeking to ensure that the council kept control for so many different reasons. A developer could very well come along now, buy the site, land bank it, and then develop when economic circumstances are different. Why not keep that site in public ownership so that you have the choice and you have those options later and you can control better what gets built there? Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. I gave you a lot of latitude there. So in answer to your question, will I do that or will we do that? I really do feel if you listen to the discussion in a few moments and hear what we have to say, I think you'll have a different view when you walk out the door. Just hold that thought, Emily. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So, councillors, I gave the speaker quite a bit of latitude, and I won't be giving that to you. So you stick to the recommendations all the time, please. So we now move on, and I have asked for the team, and I'll say we are moving the item 19 up to deal with the first item. We're dealing with this item 19 now. And in doing that, you will be aware that item 19A is indeed a matter of part 2. So any references to anything in there, we will be discussing it later on. So there will be ample opportunity. Please be very careful on how you deal with it, because there is financial information, and just to help the members of the public, There is financial stuff in there which obviously would prejudice the council and prejudice all sorts if we exposed all that at this particular moment in time. But it will become a matter in the public domain at the appropriate time. So we'll move straight on now to item 19, which is land development land disposal programme. And here we have 4 recommendations, and I'm going to, and you'll see what they are. I'm going to ask David Hodgson to talk to the recommendation to give us his report. Thank you, David.
Thank you, Chair. As promised when the report regarding the future of ECL was approved, a report has now come forward setting out a disposal strategy to address any element of the loan that will not be recoverable as a result of the scaling back of ECL's operations. It's important to note that this process is not yet complete and the final outcome is not yet known. It's also important to note that these are officer recommendations, as you stated, and that there are 2 reasons that underpin the recommendations before you. Firstly, as you have pointed out, I have a legal duty to act in the best interest of the taxpayer of the city, and the city surveyor has a duty to obtain best consideration for the council in respect of all property transactions. And this underpins the recommendations before you. I'm sorry you haven't pointed that out because that's the one that will be appended to the minutes. Secondly, whilst this recommendation deals with a specific issue in respect of the loans, I have a duty to advise you on all financial matters, and you should take decisions being mindful of the wider financial context. In this respect, the council has a significant need for capital resources. The council owns and is responsible for maintaining 100 operational properties, 28 bridges, 50 parks, 90 play areas, alongside footpaths, a river, canal, and a Roman wall. There is currently £22 million of works identified in the latest condition survey that are unfunded. Alongside that, there is a report on the agenda this evening identifying the need for additional financial resources for the MERV. With interest rates making borrowing unaffordable, the generation of capital receipts is one way of making inroads into the backlog without requiring cuts to our services. The total cost of funding these works to the revenue budget would require £1.75 million of cuts to our revenue budget, on top of the unidentified 4.4 million of cuts already required in the medium-term financial plan. And there is a real risk that a significant storm could cause the closure of one of our assets with no identified ways of funding repairs. Therefore, officers are recommending the unrestricted sale of the 2 assets. The reason that Mary Archers is being recommended for sale arises from the fact that members have already approved the sale of the asset and have received the information demonstrating that there is sufficient spare capacity in the city to absorb the loss of this car park. Members are also reminded that 3.6 million of the unfunded condition survey works are in respect of the Mary Archers car park. Clifton Hill is recommended as it is the asset being recovered from ECL and as such would be most appropriate for disposal. As a reminder, any sale with an undervalue of £2 million or more will require Secretary of State approval. I'm happy to take any questions.
Right, thank you, David, for that, and very concise. And I do know that the members of the public would have been listening very intently to that and can understand the scale of the problem. It's right to say that disposing of these 2 assets will not cure all those problems, will they? No. And if I thought they did, we may take a different view. However, we have to take it in order, but mindful of what we've done. This has been discussed by myself and the executive, and I am proposing to vary these recommendations in the following way. 2.1, to be replaced with the disposal of land at Mary Archers Street car park as shown on the boundary site plans in Appendix 1. The multi-storey car park site would be used for co-living and the surface car park for residential use. 2.2. The disposal of land at Clifton Hill as shown on the site boundary plans in Appendix 2 would be for the use of residential homes on the existing site shaded blue, retaining the green shaded area for its existing use as open space, and retaining the yellow and purple shaded areas for their current existing uses. So members of the public who asked those questions a few moments ago, you've had the detailed answer, which I couldn't give you at that time. I had to wait until this was formally done and recommended. In moving those changes, the executive and myself has thought long and hard about all of this and about the challenges that the officers quite rightly have made clear to us. We've taken those on board. However, we are a political organisation and we look at the politics. We have made a number of statements in relation that on these two sites there will be no purpose-built student accommodation. Just pause on that thought to remind people of our decision. We have said that we would have residential on the existing site at Clifton Hill. It already has planning permission. What these recommendations do in 2.3 and 2.4 tell the officers to, when I say go away, I don't mean it like that. We'll go away and look at what we have decided, if this is approved and approved by council, to bring back the recommendations in a form of how it would be achieved. That will then come back to myself, as it says in 2.3, and I've given an undertaking to advise the executive of exactly how that will be done. So there will be no secret meetings or me and a director dealing with this in some untransparent way. On this case, what the proposals we are bringing forward, and I can explain it more in part 2 later on, will bring the opportunity for us to cover that element of which is outstanding, which will come from ECL. And in doing so, will allow us to do what ECL would have been doing for us if they were still there, bringing forward residential homes and homes for people in Exeter on both sides. Exactly what its purpose would do, this will continue. So this is what we've considered. The finance director is quite rightly pointed out other challenges that we have in the council, and we do not underestimate those challenges that we will have to revisit at each and every time, given all those factors of what is going on in relation to the economy at this particular moment in time. But we have a determination to stick to the undertakings that we made to the residents in Newtown and Clifton Hill. And we are, more importantly, if you don't mind me saying, going to deliver homes for people in Exeter of all classes that we will, when I say classes, I mean of housing development types of classes, what we want to do. We committed to no purpose-built student accommodation on council-owned land, and we've carried out that. But what this report will show the councillors in part 2, the cost of that decision of sticking with residents in Exeter. And I hope whether you're for us or against us, that is taken on board and clearly understood. So with that, I had to explain that because this is a sensitive issue, a major issue that we've dealt with. But I believe I've given the assurances there to the community in Newtown on what we intend to do, and I hope that will suffice for now. But of course, the directors may come back and say to us, well, we need to dispose of it either in a partnership or this. I don't know what they're going to say. We will look at it. We will deal with it. And I can assure you, we've got a consultation charter. If they wanted to revise, and I'm not saying they would, I'm just saying if they said, well, that planning application suited them, we can't do it because of X, Y, Z. I don't know. I'm giving that as an example. We will bring that back and we will discuss it. And of course, the residents through the planning process and our consultation charter will have a say in all of that. So I'm trying to assure people that we will do the right things at the right time. So having said rather a lot, I've now got Councillor Vizard speaking under Standing Order 44. Councillor Vizard, if you'd like to come forward. Okay, can I have a seconder for the amendment? But we'll take a vote on the end of it. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you for bringing the item forward. It's greatly appreciated by me and I'm sure other members of the public. A long agenda. So let me start by warmly welcoming the Leader's amendments. I know this will put many Newtown residents' minds at rest, and I acknowledge the sight of the report and certain press coverage has spooked some people who feared a U-turn, understandably so. I know it may not suit the political agenda of all of our opponents who have perhaps been sharpening their knives on this occasion, but I'm delighted that the Labour leadership of this council will keep its word to residents and that the Leader is not returning. I do hope also that tonight's amendment will receive the same level of press reporting as the recent rather speculative pieces about the advanced report did. So it was right and transparent that the council commissioned a renewed independent report and valuation on these sites following the winding down of Exeter City Living to allow members to consider options for future sale and development. You'll forgive my focus on Clifton Hill as a local ward member, but it is worth briefly recalling the recent history and context. When proposals came forward to sell and develop the whole of the site a few years ago, we listened to the community telling us they valued and wanted to save the green space and sporting facilities, and a balanced plan for new homes and the preservation of the rest of the site was brought forward instead. Clifton Hill is a brownfield site of the kind that any local authority needs to consider carefully when faced with a national housing crisis and in the context of the challenge here in Exeter of preserving the threatened green fields and ridgeline of our city. We must make choices about development, not shirk our responsibility to provide homes or reject every option as some seek to do. We know we need homes of all types in Exeter over the next 20 years. We have no powers to control the numbers of students the university intakes or the number of people who wish to come and live and work in our wonderful city, or over market prices. We don't have the control we'd often like to have over the planning system either. I'm conscious too that local authorities face enormous financial pressures after 13 years of cuts to grants from Tory and coalition governments, which places a terrible strain on our treasured local services as well as our capital assets, as we've heard. Exeter City Council is turning down millions in potential receipts by not selling the whole site if this is agreed by council, and by ruling out student accommodation too. So I understand the business case for the proposal in the report, but while this council is financially resourceful and prudent, we are not a business. So I welcome the amendment, which weighs up the need for homes and financial receipts with a compelling environmental case for this site and the benefits to biodiversity, physical and mental health and well-being to one of the areas of highest deprivation in the city. I welcome the conclusion that we had it right and that we should stand by our previous decision, ensuring that only the existing site already earmarked for family homes, the footprint of the former leisure centre and car park, be taken forward. This would mean the public green space and areas currently occupied by the ski slope and golf driving range will continue to be excluded from development and protected for the community. It is notable that executive members are also recommending firmly sticking with the council's existing policy not to sell land within its ownership for student housing development. This is the right decision and one I have continued to call for as a representative of my community. It demonstrates that Labour in Exeter remains committed to protecting and enhancing our environment, our communities, and raising wellbeing standards and health outcomes, while also providing desperately needed new homes to help address the national housing crisis. It's a difficult balance, but it's one we must strike, and one this amendment would ensure we get right. Thank you, members.
Thank you, Councillor. Okay, thank you very much indeed. And now we're going to start the discussion. You're sat first there, Councillor Johnson. You sent me a number of questions, which
been wasting my time. And you're also reading them.
I do not like wasting your time all the time. I've got most of the answers are they're no longer relevant in view of the yes, and so I can respond to them at a later time if you want. I've got answers, but I think it would just detract from what we're discussing this evening. Is that okay?
I would agree. Some of them are far too much.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, okay, yeah. So that's that dealt with. So I'll start with you if you would like to make a contribution, Councillor Jobson.
Well, I would like to welcome the.
Thank you. I would like to sort of welcome the amendments. I remain concerned at the thought of yet more co-living, which will not help house any residents of Exeter. It's short-term accommodation for outsiders in the main, and regret that Mary Archer's site will not all be used for residential development for the residents of Exeter. But without going into more detail, which will yet to be seen, that would be my comment at this stage. It's an opportunity missed if Mary Archer's car park is to be used, that it is not all to be used to provide housing for the residents of Exeter.
Okay. Thank you for your contribution. Pick some of them. Councillor Moore.
Thank you very much. I do feel that voting on this matter should be wait until the matters in part 2 are discussed, because I think there is additional information that people need to consider before they vote. However, if we look at the public report, I have a number of issues that I would like to draw to your attention that need consideration. I think it is very interesting that I don't feel that in the report there is sufficient financial information or material information in the report to inform the decision that's being made. I think we're not being given the whole picture here about the proposed disposals and the extent of the powers for unrestricted disposal, though you have addressed some of that, so that is to be welcomed. I'm concerned about clause 8.3. It says it's important to note that any sale will be depending on planning permission. And Clifton Hill has that planning permission on a very favourable basis. And we know from the planning committee that the conditions to provide affordable housing were removed because a grant was possible through Homes England to help fund it. The council also indicated at that planning meeting that it would buy those affordable homes. So I'd like to know if that grant has been lost or is it still available? And are those homes still to be bought by the council? So have we lost some potential homes? If we look at 8.3, there is no information about the feasibility study for Mary Archer's car park and how close that itself is in relation to the planning permission. I have further information to ask about that in part 2. But the question is, to what extent did the council or ECL work on this, and why was it not brought forward to planning? And also the council was awarded a grant for its demolition, and that was due to be done by the end of January. So what is happening in relation to that? So it's more complex than just saying we will dispose of the properties. In section 8.14, It says it might be possible to keep sites that currently accommodate facilities and encourage an active lifestyle, like the Exeter Ski Club. And then it mentions the Exeter Water Sports Association. Now, that's not in Clifton Hill. There's no river there, but it is in St David's. And it's by releasing more value from the land. So the public need to know if you plan to sell the Water Sports Association property too. In 8.16, it says the outcome will hopefully be a receipt from student developers. So obviously you've changed that game, and that's fine. However, we now know, given the item on the agenda later, about the community infrastructure levy. So we'll have luxury co-living bedsits in an area of high deprivation instead of homes or flats. So I would suggest that residents are going to have to pay for this 3 times over. They're going to pay for the failure to bring forward decent homes that ECL were working on. And when these sites are delivered by private developers as co-living bedsits, we will know from elsewhere on this agenda that the paltry sums that developers will be expected to pay will leave residents picking up the tab for the lack of investment in the community infrastructure that we will need in high density areas, which that area of St David's already is. The report continues with a narrative of macroeconomic conditions that have contributed to ECL's insolvency. But as the auditor pointed out and insurance review highlighted, there has been a real failure on part of the executive to provide proper oversight of ECL and moving the goalposts. And this lack of oversight is continuing. So we need to know how much money has been spent by the council since ECL was set up, but looking at viability of some of these sites that are proposed for disposal. What stage the sites were progressed to, and what value that adds to their disposal, and why didn't they come forward for planning? These were taken by the council because the council was the client, not by ECL providing that service. So we need to know what decisions were taken internally to progress them or to prevent them.
Councillor Moore, can you just take a pause for a moment, and then I will let you talk again. You're asking quite a long string of questions, which I'm not going to get you the answers for tonight, because one, Mark is trying desperately to record all.
That's fine, I can send him my speech afterwards.
So what I'm going to ask you to do, to get a response to any of those, you will need to email me with all those points you're making. Now, that's one thing. Now, what I would really like you to do is to continue to talk about the amended recommendations, of which we are dealing with 2 specific sites at this moment in time. Many of the considerations, and I know it all looks good back there, what you're doing, but many of the considerations will be dealt with in part 2, which is the appropriate forum for all of that. So I'd like to hear what you have to say about the 2 amended recommendations. I'm not going to be talking about the Water Sports Club or any of these other things at this moment in time. Please, can you keep to those 2 recommendations? As I've said, although I said I wouldn't, I'm giving everybody a lot of latitude tonight because this is an important item, but please do not try to confuse the issues that we are trying to deal with at this stage. Thank you. If you'd like to continue now.
Thank you. However, the Water Sports Association is listed in that report, and it'd be very easy for you to clarify that when I
Councillor, there is no recommendation. I've clarified it. There is no recommendations relating to the Water Sports Association or Haven Road or any of that being made by this executive tonight. So please do not be disruptive on this point.
I'm not being disruptive. I'm grateful that you've clarified it. It's very helpful. But however, I do feel that this report is very light on its financial information that you'll be expecting councillors at council to decide upon, even with the recommendations. Only the headline capital costs are known, and not the full cost in the detail of the winding down, which should really be known by now.
Councillor, I've got to come back to you again. Please stick to the recommendations, because you're painting a picture here that somehow to the public that we're being totally incompetent because they won't be seeing the part 2 papers at this moment. Stick to the recommendations, please. That is what we're dealing with tonight. The 4 recommendations between us. That is what the executive will determine presently, and that's what, if it goes through to the council meeting, that is what we will be asking council to resolve. All right? I won't be asking them to resolve anything other than this at this stage, because 2.3 is quite clear on what it's doing. Now, I don't normally try to intervene and answer all your questions because but I can see what's going on here, and I don't think it's been helpful for this discussion. This is a platform for you to be able to ask us points about the recommendations, not a platform for you to go off on all these things which are not relevant to these recommendations. I'm sorry to have to say that, but I would ask for your cooperation in trying to make this meeting efficient and deal with the issues before us. Thank you,
Okay.
Councillor.
I have a concluding paragraph. However, I would remind you,
Just
under the,
ignored everything. All right. Cool.
no, I do have a right to speak as well as ask questions under the Constitution and making a contribution. And I am speaking to the recommendation, and I still believe that even with those recommendations, there's insufficient financial information, and there have not been a presentation or analysis of other options for other sites that might be appropriate for disposal. And I do not understand the basis of the recommendation for Mary Archer Street car park to be built upon as co-living, which is inappropriate for the area. And we are not clear about the extent of the liabilities that the council face, and the issue around, you said that this is an officer's recommendation about the governance by the
Please,
executive.
you should stop when the chair speaks at any meeting. You should always defer to the chair. That is how you do in the rules of debate, please. And look, please stick to the recommendations. You aren't able to amend anything or to approve if you don't vote. You're here in order to make a contribution. That's what I would like you to do. Many of these points that you're now raising, should this recommendation goes through, would be quite legitimate to make at the full council meeting where every member of the council get a vote. So you're turning this into a bit of an argument between the pair of us now, and I don't think it is beneficial. People are here asking what is happening to their community in Clifton Hill. And I believe we've answered that in this amendment, and we will have a discussion. So please stick to the recommendations. These other matters, you will have an opportunity in the part 2 and indeed at the full council. Okay, thank you. If you can
Okay,
conclude,
so-
that would help.
Okay, I will conclude. However, I would hope that through my contributions that I have made, that there is further information that is presented to councillors before they are expected to vote it at the council meeting. And it doesn't just affect community in Clifton Hill, it very much affects the community in the city centre too. So all my comments are really relevant to that, and I would hope that further proper information is provided and the issues around governance are noted.
Okay, if you can, as I said, you said governance at the end, I'm not sure what you mean, but you will explain what that means. Thank you very much. Councillor Mitchell.
Thank you, Chair. As I said, we'll just keep to the principles that are here. Part 2 will deal with the minute detail. I would like to thank the officers for writing a report on which all 39 members of the council will agree they would not support. I think that must be almost a unique occasion for this council. As you've already pointed out, we're talking to the amendments, which of course we've only just been aware of as opposition members at the start of this meeting. I think the first thing to bear in mind is, for all of us to bear in mind, as you pointed out, this isn't a get out of jail free card, the option you're going for. There are repercussions for us, and other decisions will have to be made in relation to get this through as a total package. I think that's worth bearing in mind, that it isn't an answer to all our questions. I do agree and do support the view that the unrestricted is removed from it, because clearly that allows us as the owners of the land to stick the conditions and attempt, shall we say, to get what we wish to be built on that land. As with Councillor Jobson, I have my concerns about co-living. I would like to see the evidence, but I will make the decision at that time when we come to it. And I think also it's worth bearing in mind for all members of the public that this is only a recommendation to full council. This is not the end of the situation tonight. And those of us who want to do more research based upon what you agree tonight will have that opportunity and the ability to amend at full council for sort of round 3, or whatever we want to call it, of this particular contest. The only thing that does concern me, you did make a mention that you felt quite correctly that this will go to council and then come back for 2-3 for a final a delegated decision to it. But there's nothing in the existing amended motion to suggest that it goes from here to full council and then back again. I know you made it as an aside in a comment, and I'll take your word for it, but it's not actually in the amendment. I don't know whether Mark can come up with a form of words that will accommodate that. Clearly, we've got the previous incarnation through ECL was to build on these sites what we wanted with a degree of social housing for the market in Exeter, and hopefully to retain some profits for us to reinvest in further ventures. That has not happened. We're now in a situation where we're selling 2 sites, and we're still potentially left with a deficit at the end of it. My only concern, particularly in relation to Clifton Hill, that a lot of time and a lot of money was spent on developing some very good plans in regard to the housing standards and the buildings we put on that site, is that even though it has planning permission, which enhances its value, my concern is I think we will see some speculative application from planning developers in advance of any sale to test what the market will take on that, and that does raise concerns for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Okay, I'm going to open this up for discussion now. I've got Councillor Morse first, and then Councillor Pearson, followed by Parkhouse. Right, Councillor Morse.
First of all, I think it's really important we say that not all details of this report are made public, and there are really good reasons why they're not made public. I think sometimes the mood that is wanted to be created is that we're trying to hide something from you. We're really not. What we're going to do at some point is sell some land, and if we told everybody what we're willing to accept for it, they'll only offer us that, so that would be really stupid. So that's why those details are missing, and it is a really important thing that we understand that, because it is the council's money. It's your money, and we should be prudent with it. So that's the reason we do this, not because we don't want people to know what we're talking about when we close our doors. It should also be noted that the report has come to this committee and has been written by officers. And usually when officers write a report for committee, we agree with them. In this case, we didn't. But they, as officers, really felt it was important that the details of their report were what were presented to you as members of the public. So that's why you've got an amendment at this point, because even though they believe this is the right thing to do, as politicians, we don't believe it's the right thing to do. So there are people in this room that have very different opinions, but we have to represent you as local members, local people in Exeter, and that means that we are differing from their recommendation. But their recommendation is so important to them that we have allowed that to be in this room. And I think we need to understand that a little bit, because the complexities of this are that we have to do what we can to be as prudent with your money as we possibly can. But we also, as a local authority, stood up and made a commitment that we would not build purpose-built student accommodation on land we have owned or allowed it to be built after we sell it. And we've stood by that. And the financial benefits of selling this in other ways would have been much better for us. And we do recognise that. And it's really important that the public recognise that, because the extensive details in part 2, which you're being led to believe don't exist, there are extensive details in part 2, make it really clear why the office recommendation is what it is and why we don't want to support it, I suppose, as well. But as a city, we must recognise that the financial impact of these political decisions that we make is quite significant. I would also like to say that the idea that co-living doesn't provide a need for housing is really not correct. Co-living provides an established need for housing in the city for a slightly transient population, but because they're living in co-living, it means the housing that already exists is not being taken up by those people. So the pressure on other housing types is relieved by co-living. So I just think it's important that sometimes some of these misnomers that are thrown out in conversation are just reflected on. So whilst I actually don't think this is the most prudent decision for this city to make, I believe it's the right decision, and I will be supporting it.
Thank you. Councillor Pearce.
Thank you, Chair. We've heard a lot so far tonight about decisions made in the past. Before my time as a councillor, before half of us are here in the room, I think, as members. But I think they were the right decisions at the time, and we've stood by that numerous times over the years to say we will not develop purpose-built student accommodation as a city council. There's plenty of private developers who want to come forward and do that. And that's fine, and it serves a very specific need. We've gone over the last decade from a situation with 14,000 students in the city to 35 to 39,000 currently. And in spite of all the development that's taken place, specifically focused at dealing with that housing need, it's not kept pace. And it means that we've lost traditional housing stock, family homes, to HMOs and for other transient populations who we hope settle here because they love the city as much as we do. But they are here for a short time to start with. But what I want to focus on really is 12, 18 months, 24 months down the line and what position we'll be in then. On Clifton Hill, there'll be homes for local people. On Mary Archer Street car park, there'll be homes for local people. They may not be of the tenure that everybody wants and desires as the best option, but there will be there'll be homes for people. That's always what we've said would happen on these sites. The mechanism for delivery might have changed slightly, but the end result will be homes for people on Clifton Hill, on the brownfield site, and then on a city centre development site that has been agreed, Mary Archer Street car park. It will turn into homes. And that's really, really important because it's been referenced many times tonight by several people. There is a national homelessness crisis, a national housing crisis. We need to do our part as a city to build for the future. Delivering homes on these sites is going to do that. Thank you.
Councillor Parkhurst.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to welcome the amendments, as other members have, to the recommendations this evening. I also wanted to put a bit of a, I'm probably the youngest person in this room. I don't want to put money on it, but yeah, probably. And I would just want to say that, actually, I lived in co-living for many years in London. Lots of people go through that when they're young professionals. You want somewhere, you're not necessarily tied to somewhere for a long time. That 6, 12, 18-month tenancy really suits young people who want to get into work, but have not great work contracts, which is obviously the case for a lot of young people, young professionals. The existing co-living in Exeter actually has packages for essential workers that we were so keen to clap for during COVID. So I was, to sort of, do an us and them in terms of people living in the city. I would just like to say, Exeter's a place for everyone. We should be really inclusive, and co-living really embodies that inclusivity that we're looking for. And I'd just like to really thank the leadership for taking this stance and changing these amendments. I think I'll leave that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Have we got any? Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Chair. A lot has already been said that I would have said, and I wholeheartedly agree with it. There is a housing emergency. There is a need for people to live in Exeter in good quality accommodation. The housing needs that our population has is diverse. There is lots of different needs. Now, I'm lucky enough that I don't have a son or daughter in my back room using up my space, while they actually want to live out in their own space, live their own lives. Co-living gives that opportunity. I think the other thing that's quite important to me personally is my ward is Pin Hoe. We've fought very hard to protect one of the green ridge lines there, and what would have been built in its place would have housed 60, 70 families. Now that space that would have been used up would be lost forever, and the amount of space that would be used is wasteful. If we're looking at an ever-increasing population and a need to find houses, we don't have that much space left in the city to have a detached house with a front garden, a back garden, a drive, and a double garage. That sort of thing we cannot fit into the city. We've talked a lot about livable Exeter. We've talked a lot about brownfield sites. These two that we are looking at here are brownfield sites. They're pretty flipping ugly. If anybody's been past Clifton Hill, it's not looking at its best. It needs to be put to good use. And why not provide good quality residential homes? When we're talking about co-living, as my colleague Councillor Parkhurst has said, it works. She's lived in them. It is an opportunity for people to live in their own lives in their own space. And I think it's very easy at this point in my life to make judgments about what people's housing needs and expectations are. They've kind of got bigger as I've grown older, but actually having your own space is priceless. I remember when I moved out of my home, had my own space, and co-living will provide that. So our housing needs in the city are diverse. This meets some of the needs. Brownfield sites are what we've got to develop. We've got to protect our green ridge line, our green spaces. This does that. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor. Do we have anybody else, any other members wish to speak at this time? Okay. Dave, you've got a lot of questions coming to you, and we're going to have a part 2 presently, and I think that's the best place to answer them. Just a remark about quality and luxury was used. Nowhere have we said luxury. However, I would like to see the best possible accommodation for everybody. If I can use a railway sense, so would I abolish first class? No, I'd abolish second class. That's what I believe. And so therefore we want to have the best possible accommodation for people. Having decent accommodation shouldn't be regarded as luxury. It should be basic needs, and that's what we want to do. But these things will come out. I think it's been a good discussion. I hope the members of the public can see what we're doing. There are a number of other issues, and I'm addressing them at the moment, in relation that we have to deal with, which are financial considerations, which the responsibility falls upon us all as councillors that we need to discuss, and we will discuss. There are a number of issues about a lot of things that we all have to come into play. However, I'm going to quote somebody now, I'm not going to say who that person was, but the long march started with the first step. And indeed, this is the first step that we need to take to sort this long march of housing and also the council's finances. And so I want it on record that I totally respect the officers bringing this to us, to tell us, to remind us of the consequences of our decisions that we're taking. And now we're going to have to work really hard because we've got some other agenda items of where we wish to spend money on, which are not funded at this moment in time. And so we will have to discuss that as and when. So I've moved the 2 recommendations, amendments on part 1 and part 2, with part 3 and part 2, 3 and 2, 4. I move all those recommendations as amended. Second. All those in favour of those recommendations?
Thank you, councillor. That's unanimous, Chair. So that has been carried as amended.
Thank you very much. And I hope the people who can understand now what we're trying to do on that long journey. And I do remember when they all came in, remember with the bees and everything else. I remember all that. So it had an impact on us. So thank you very much. Okay, we'll now return to the agenda, which is item 7, which is the proposed withdrawal of the dissolution of the heart. No, I'm bringing this one forward first. Sorry. I got a lot of people chairing this meeting, haven't I? I do. It's lovely, isn't it? Anyway, but thank you anyway. But thank you very much. We'll just wait for people just to move out. Just one moment. Just one moment. Oh yeah. Oh, I hope not. Okay, I'm now taking item 7 in advance of item 6, which we will deal with in a moment, because the Chief Executive will have to leave us. So item 7, we've got some proposals there, and I'm going to go straight into Chief Executive.
Thank you very much, Chair, and good evening, members. So the members may be aware that the Council is currently a member of the Heart of the South West Joint Committee. And this report that's before you this evening reflects similar reports that's going to the other constituent authorities who are also part of the Heart of the South West Joint Committee. So to make really clear, the proposals in this report only relate to the Joint Committee's governance and doesn't speak to the Heart of the South West Local Enterprise Partnership or the associated Heart of the South West Joint Scrutiny Committee. So that's quite important. We're only here this evening to speak about the Joint Committee. So members will be aware that there have been changes in looking at local enterprise partnerships. In specific, the conversations about devolution locally, and I have to say, Chair, apologies, there is now an error in this report. So when this report was drafted, it was Devon, Plymouth and Torbay that were in conversation with government about a devolution deal. You'll be aware that Plymouth has now withdrawn, leaving Devon and Torbay. Anyhow, the integration of LEPs into local authorities, as well as their relationship with any devolution deal, means that effectively the purpose of the Joint Committee has now been superseded. And through other existing partnership arrangements, the constituent authorities can deliver the aims that committee was delivering. So effectively, the Joint Committee is felt to being superfluous and not really adding any additionality to each constituent authority. A steer has been taken from the leaders and the senior members of several of the constituent authorities for these proposals to be brought forward officially to the appropriate governance bodies of the constituent authorities. And of course, in our case, it is Exec and Council, again, to agree to the withdrawal of the Council from the Joint Committee and for the dissolution of that committee. I think all the relevant details, Chair, are contained within the report. If members did have any questions, I'm happy to answer those. Thank you.
Thank you, Bindu. Just to make a comment before I go, to say, are there any other options? Well, if we don't agree to leave, it will be us on our own talking about nothing. But if we want to do that, and on occasions we do that very well, and actually that may not be such a bad idea. We'll be the only ones there. So there you've heard the report. It needs 8 constituent authorities to terminate us. So we created this in the executive and the council together, so we must bring it there to end it. So, Councillor Moore.
Thank you very much. It's obviously the report is clear about the joint committee being withdrawn from the joint committee, but I was just interested to know in relation to the dissolution of the Heart of the South West, can the cost be outlined, and will Exeter City Council be liable for any of that?
Okay, thank you. Councillor Mitchell.
Just a point I think you amplified in your last comment, which wasn't clear in this. This is a joint exercise of withdrawing by a number of authorities. We aren't being maverick. There are the other 7 along with us to ensure this one dies a natural death.
This is not a Brexit. Councillor Jobson.
I have nothing to add.
Okay, I'm going to open it up now for discussion. Councillor Wright.
Not much to discuss on this. Yes, it's a no-brainer, as they say, but just a question for Dave, because it does say that on dissolution of this, there will be funds of 43k that will be distributed back to the councils. So in a way of answering Councillor Moore's question of how much will it cost us, I'm saying how much we're going to get back.
My understanding was that it was tiered by the size of authority. So I think our contribution was about £2,800. So I wouldn't expect very much back of the unallocated balance.
Okay, is there anybody else? Okay, just before we can, there is reference to the LEP, which is the local enterprise. That in itself is ending in April. I was at a meeting yesterday representing the Devon districts, and obviously all the assets are held by Somerset. That's just the quirk about it was in the CRC. That's all coming to an end, and that will be distributed amongst the top tier authorities for that, because that is where the responsibility is going. So the heart of the Southwest functions here and most probably manifests itself into some other form, because Somerset has gone into a unitary authority. They're having their own deal going that way, and then we will go into that one. So I dare say some of those funds will follow a proportionate into that committee there. But there is no divvy, unfortunately, which is going to help us in the medium-term financial plan, other than we won't be paying 2,800 to this, but we may have to pay something to whatever comes before. So, are you okay with that? Okay. Yeah. So I'll move the recommendation. Can I have a seconder, please? All those in favour?
That's unanimous, Chair. That has been carried.
Thank you. And now, item 6. Are we okay? And here we are. This is members' allowances 24-25, and there are a number of recommendations, 8 in total, and I'm going to ask Mark to explain them to us.
Thank you, Chair. First, just apologies from Derek Phillips, the Chair of the remuneration panel. He will be joining us at Council on the 12th of December. But this report basically considers the findings of the Council's independent remuneration panel. I'm going to slow down when I say that. And which met in October 2023. And it was to discuss the level of members' allowances for the 2024-2025 period. The panel's remuneration scheme provides, just for information, a reasonable recompense for time, commitment, and duties involved in being a councillor. This year, the panel had done some additional work. They'd undertaken some surveys and interviews with various members and obviously opposition group leaders, and obviously our leader. And the remuneration and level of work that has been carried out by members was assessed and cross-referenced with the allowances to date. The panel recommended a 4% increase based on the Meridian percentage increase, which was in line with staff payment awards, as a benchmark for the basic councillor allowances for 2024-2025, which also then feeds into special responsibility allowances, and so forth, aside with the basic allowance and move forward, which is contained in Appendix A. And this amount is actually an equation to a £261 increase in the level of basic allowance for each member, and this will come into effect from, if approved by council, of course, is into effect from the 1st of April 2024. And again, as mentioned, this just to reflect the time of the average council spends on constituency work, casework, local community work, and other general council duties. And so the scheme was recommended by the panel, so it's highlighted in Appendix A, and it also cross shows you what the previous years were. And of course, so the 8 recommendations are contained in the report, and I'll just quickly flip through them, and I'll try my best to answer any questions I can.
Okay,
on this matter.
Thank you, Mark. Mark, what was the name of that panel again? Right. Okay. Right. Just moving on. Okay. So we've got the recommendations there. As Mark has reminded us, Derek Phillips will come along to full council, because it's a matter for full council, but we are recommending to full council the report that they've submitted. So I'll come to you first, Councillor Johnson. No? Okay, Councillor Moore. Councillor Mitchell. Okay.
Very open, very fair. All I'd be intrigued to know is whether anybody ever looks at inter-authorities, because it does seem to vary from some authorities to others, and quite dramatically, even within days. I do find that strange, that policy equilibrium across all district councils.
Yeah, well, we'll disagree with that. It is what it is. Each council is it. Anyway.
Yeah.
Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Chair. I actually was a member of a remuneration panel in Mid Devon. So what I do know is that they do compare authorities, but that the remuneration panel makes its own decision. And recommendation to the council. So, and one of the things that us, like other council do, is hands off. This is an independent recommendation. It's not us choosing to make our allowances larger. This is a recognition of the work that we do, and unfortunately, the impact of inflation. But we don't step out of line with the settlement to the staff. I think those are key things to recognise.
Okay, thank you. Do I have anybody else? If not, I think that's okay, and I've got an excellent idea for a party game at a certain time of night at Christmas. Okay, so those are the recommendations. All those in favour, can I have a seconder first? All those in favour?
That's unanimous, Chair. That has been carried.
Thank you very much. And now we come to item 8. And item 8 is the overview of the general revenue budget 23-24, quarter 2. And here you will see there are 5 recommendations. Dave Hodson.
Thank you, Chair. I should say you might want to change the agenda around again, otherwise you're stuck with me for the next 5 items. So these are the usual quarterly updates on our financial position, covering the general fund and moving on through capital to housing revenue accounts. I could actually get the recording from quarter 1 and just play that back to you, because pretty much it's exactly the same position. So we've still got significant underperformance in some of our key income budgets, namely car parking, trade waste, and a number of others, which is being offset by higher investment interest being received, our leisure income, and a high number of vacant posts. So broadly speaking, similar position, actually slightly lower overspend on our services, but very similar position as it was. This performance is now 3 quarters in a row. We're reporting significant underperformance in the income targets, and that will need to be addressed when we set the budget for the next financial year. Other than that, I'd like to draw members' attention to section 8.11, which sets out supplementary budget requests. There is one for additional funding, a request of £20,000 to allow the council to invest in its debt recovery team, strengthen our debt recovery process, and that's regarding the collection of general debt rather than council tax or business rates or housing rents. Happy to take any questions.
Okay. Thank you. So I'll come to Councillor Moore. Thank you for advance notice of the 2 questions. Would it help you to have the answers to those questions before you make your contributions, or can I give you the answers at the end of your contribution? How would you like to play it? Choice. Sorry?
I don't mind, I have the answers as well.
Yes, I know you would. I knew that.
And then you can meet my match.
Yeah, so my first question was, there's in section 8.2, there's an overspend of 276k, which identifies the impact of excess living being scaled back. So I just wanted to know, is that the figure for the year or to date? And I'd also like to know how you intend to fund that cost. And my second question I put in advance is relating to 8.7, and given that the council approved the funds for demolition of the bus station, will you actually be asking council for it to be spending for it to be able to spend the money on covering the ECL funding gap? So I'm just wanting to know about that. And I'm just interested to know about the point that Dave raised about strengthening the debt collection, given that the HRA team is undertaking some of the debt collection activities in relation to rents, does that mean that an additional amount is going to be required under the HRA to pay for that service there? No, but it relates because the HRA is going to be picking up some of the debt collection function in relation to rents, which will take it out of the general fund unless it was already covered by the general fund.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll come back to that at the end. Councillor Mitchell.
Just a couple of general points on this one. There seems to be a pattern emerging, particularly on the underspends across departments in relation to staffing. And I'm just wondering whether we have any generalised statements that can appear in this report that pick up patterns that we can then, as a council, address. And I just wonder if Dave can tell us how much of the actual underspend across the council is relates to staff lack of appointment. Therefore, we're just sitting on the money because we haven't got the people there, which obviously must directly affect the services we're delivering, as against what costs we're spending on agency staff. And I think as a committee or as a council, that would be very useful to know in relation to that one. Secondly, in relation to these figures here, which are only second quarter figures, etc., is there a system within this for in-year target adjustment and reviews?
Thank you. Councillor Johnson.
Really on page 36, where about letting the score, it says membership patterns are beginning to emerge. I wondered if that could be fleshed out a little bit more as to what the average membership is beginning to be. And the same really query as Councillor Mitchell was concerned to the pattern emerging restarting being a key feature of these figures in some places, or lack of staffing. Thank you.
Okay, we'll pick that up. Right, I'm going to open it up for discussion now. Do I have anybody who got any comments? Councillor Wright, then Councillor Williams.
Thank you. I'm taking Councillor Mitchell's comments, which aren't for me, they're for you, but not all of the sort of good figures, so that the underspends are to do with staffing. Some of them are to do with really good, successful work, which has been bringing in income. So one in particular is Matford Centre and Kibbles, the livestock and auctioneers, renewing their contract with us because that's been doing really, really well. A lot of hard work goes on down there. I should go and have a look if you haven't yet. I went and I'm a vegetarian, but it was good to see. The Corn Exchange as well, markets, income, leisure services, more complex than it first appears. So also tourism, being able to get more money in. So I just want to take that opportunity to recognise that staff are working really hard and having to adopt a more sort of commercial way of looking at things than we've ever had to do before as a local authority. But where that is working and paying off, I think we ought to give it due regard and say well done.
Okay, do I have anybody else? Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to draw attention to the trade waste, where it can seem to be disappointing, but I think it's important that people recognise that we were saddled with what appears to be an unrealistic sort of historical income target for trade waste, and we've actually done really, really well in getting some big new contracts. So this is just to put it in context that although it appears it's not doing very well, it has actually done really well. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Anybody else? No? Just to say, Councillor Mitchell, I think Dave may be able to generalise in a moment as to the general position about staff. The detail, you need to email me that and we'll give you the responses back. So Dave, if you just generalise, like going, nobody's expecting you to have the numbers there and then, generalise about the issue about the staffing.
So yeah, absolutely. I don't have the the percentage that are covered by agency staff, but clearly, if you have a refuse collection team, we need to staff that properly, and therefore agency is a natural part. The challenge will be we have a natural need for agency staff to ensure that our particularly frontline services can continue, but then we also have a need that covers vacant posts within the council. I'll see what we can do with the financial information to break that down so we can analyse vacancies against the use of agency staff.
Yeah, and thank you. And Councillor Jobson, some of the points you were making, but excellent for a scrutiny meeting, by the way, about the leisure and all that sort. That is where I would expect those questions to come to the portfolio owner when he makes his report on all of that. In very quick answer to the two questions, and I'm under some pressure here to give the answers that I said I would give. In relation to the two questions about the figure year to date, Councillor Moore, this is just a projection for the year. That's the answer to that one. And with regard to, you've asked me, would I be able to spend the money on covering the ECL debt from the Democrat? No, is the answer to that. So we've got the 5 recommendations there. All those in favour of the no, there's no. You need to write to us about it, and that's what I do. That's the way it is. Okay. If you're going to give detailed questions,
Well, it wasn't a detailed question, it was a general question whether we have targets we do it during the year.
and you need to email me with that, and we'll get you an answer back. Okay. So, can I have a second for the 5 recommendations, please? All those in favour of the recommendations, please show.
Unanimous, Chair, that has been carried.
Okay, we now move on to the general fund monitoring, item 9, that is. The general fund capital monitoring statement, quarter 2, and we've got 2 recommendations here. Dave Hodgson.
Thank you, Chair. Again, I could bring the recording from quarter 1 because very little has changed in terms of the report. So at quarter 1, 28 million of the capital programme was deferred, bringing it down to around 42 million pounds. To date, we have spent 2.2 million. That reflects 2 things. One, the sheer challenge we have in tendering and getting acceptable tenders. And as you will see in a moment from the request for additional funding, we are struggling to bring tenders in within the budget that we have available and that you've approved. And that results in one of 2 things. We either rethink the scheme and go back out to the market, or we come back and ask for additional funding because we can't overspend what you have allocated for a specific project. And the second reflects the fact that some of the staffing shortages are in the teams that deliver our capital programme. So 2.2 million, there's been very little deferred. If I was a betting man, I would guess that we will not spend a significant amount of the capital programme in this financial year. As I said, there is one additional request for funding. It relates to phase 3, so the smaller building of the civic centre and replacing the roof. The reason that's coming forward is that it houses Sure Start for children who attend there, and at the moment there's water coming through. We went out to tender with a budget. It's come in £140,000 higher than we estimated, and therefore we're requesting council approves that money so we can proceed. Final thing I want to draw your attention to, section 8.7, council signage improvement programme has been completed. So we have one thing to tick off the list. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, David. I'll come to Councillor Mitchell.
No questions, I understand.
Okay. Councillor Jobson. Councillor Moore.
Thank you. I wanted to ask how that is supposed to be funded. Is it to add to the borrowing requirement, or is it funded another way? I couldn't see.
Okay, not yet, Dave. Hold it. Okay, thank you. I'll now open it up to the rest of the meeting. Anybody wish to speak? Councillor Moore.
Sorry, no. How is £140,000 different from what we thought it was going to be? I think that feels like an important question to ask, sorry.
We'll pick up the question at the end. Anybody else choose to come in? Okay, so a couple of quick points. I think you could answer those more probably quickly, David.
Yeah, so we have no unallocated capital resources available, so it will have to be borrowing. And how that's the state of the construction market as it currently stands. We have a good team who are very capable, but in this current market, things are just increasing during the time that you have a tender out there. So.
Okay, thank you very much. Those are the two recommendations before us, which I move from the chair. Can I have a seconder, please? All those in favour?
That's unanimous, Chair. That has been carried.
Thank you, Mark. We now move on to item 10, which is the HRA budget monitoring report, Q2. So hopefully you've had a little time to think about what you were asked earlier. And we got two recommendations here. David, can you speak to the recommendations, please?
Thank you, Chair. So in terms of the HRA, again, similar, very similar to Q1, two key variances within the HRA, one being a significant increase in repairs and maintenance spend, mainly due to more voids than anticipated, being offset by higher investment interest for the HRA. Essentially, how investment interest works, the general fund invests our surplus cash on behalf of the council and then pays the HRA for the use of its funds. So, broadly speaking, the balances on the major repairs reserve and the HRA working balance and the HRA capital receipts, it pays interest on those. So both are sharing around £500,000. Both are receiving about £500,000 more than expected when we set the budgets. So a similar position, but in overall terms, the long-term position of the HRA remains the same in that the ambitious capital plans exceed the resources available over the longer term. Happy to take any.
Okay.
Oh, and just to answer the question around housing rents. So in normal terms, if the general fund is providing a service to the HRA pays for that service. So if the service then transfers back to the HRA, you would normally expect it to be a net neutral position. However, the HRA has been paying less than it has cost the general fund over the last number of years, and therefore there will be an additional cost to the HRA to take back the HRA rent. Although they also do some of the general fund housing debt recovery, so that will be recharged back to the general fund.
Thank you, Mike. Councillor Johnson.
Really just a query about the voids, which seem to be high and has now come substantially down. Is it on a downward trend? Can that be said? Is it possible to predict the trend in voids?
Okay, thank you. We'll come to that at the end. Councillor Moore.
Thank you very much, and thank you for answering the question about the debt collection. So I've got a couple of questions about general repairs, which says that 60% is spent already, most expensive half of the year to come. So will people be able to get their essential repairs done? And I'm just wondering about the adaptations budget, because there's been a large number of property requests, and it says they've not had full evaluation and works are unlikely to be complete until 24-25. And I'd really request that this is a priority, particularly for adaptations, because many are elderly or frail or have a disability. So I'd like to, I think it's important that councils understand how many homes this affects and what is the likely delivery of these works to be met within that timescale. How will people be prioritised for urgent works?
Okay, thank you, Councillor Mitchell.
Just following up on the general maintenance point that Dave mentioned, could you try to explain to us the content of the increase? How much of it is due to general inflation in contracting work, and how much of it is due to additional workload? In other words, you're doing twice as many jobs, therefore you're going to be paying twice as much money out.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I open this one up for debate. Can I have anybody wish to? Councillor Wright.
Thank you. Sorry, I have, no, I shouldn't apologise for having a question, should I? It's exactly what I'm supposed to do, is ask you a question. I'm not apologising. Page 77, the Langs, houses, refurbishments on the Carrick Estate in St Thomas, which we know has been going on for some time. I can see that it's coming up. I just want to make sure I'm understanding this correctly. Originally, it was budgeted £48,000, now coming in at 323, which is quite a substantial amount. Now, I do understand what was behind that, so I'm not going to ask that. I totally get that, but obviously that then sort of throws a bit of a curveball into the budgeting. But we are almost finished. We've just got a couple more to finish. 6. Okay, I'm talking like a politician. We've got a couple, which is 6. But the progress has been incredibly slow, and I know residents in that area are feeling that. But I just want to be assured, because I can't see that it's in the, I'm confused. So my question is, it's not in the 2023-24 capital programme. It's coming up as 0. I'm on page 77, by the way. But that cost is showing in spend and forecast spend. So can I be reassured that that is going to, that spend is going to happen, even though it's not in the capital programme? Does that make sense? So I'm confused.
Is there anybody else want to make a contribution? Okay, we've got a couple of detailed points there, which I need the answer to that. I think about something what's left is Ian is going to want to say something about that. I'll have a quick response, but otherwise we have to put the answers in writing, okay? Because they are quite detailed if we're to do justice to it. A quick response, Dave, and then Ian, but I don't want to go on, Dave.
I'm sorry, I'll have to come back on the detailed questions about the repairs and maintenance, etc. The one I can answer is the Langs. So, as part of this report, if the capital programme, if something moves forward, so essentially you've approved a budget for Langs, it's just in a different year. So we're seeking to spend some of the money in this financial year. As part of this report, you'll be approving the fact that we can spend that money in this financial year rather than 24-25, where the funding is payable.
Right, okay, well, nothing to say on that. Okay, fine. I think the subtext is, what is it going to start? But we've got the recommendations there. Can I have a seconder, please? All those in favour of the recommendations on item 10, please show.
That's unanimous, Chair. Those recommendations have been carried.
So we now move to item 11, which is the Treasury Management 23-24 half-year update. We've got one recommendation, that we note the report. Dave.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this is one of the statutory reports we have to do in management of our Treasury management function. So this sets out our position in respect of surplus cash that we have invested, our borrowing, and this is based on our actual external borrowing. And then for the first time, a new section which shows the projected outturn position in respect of our repayments, statutory repayments of debt on the general fund. So in terms, as I mentioned in the last report, both the general fund and HRA are looking at around 500,000 actually. HRA is close to 600,000 extra than when we budgeted, owing to higher interest rates and higher surplus cash positions. So one of the benefits, if you can call it that, of not spending the capital programme is we have more surplus cash to invest, and therefore we generate additional funding. I am not suggesting that that's a good thing, by the way, just it's a statement of fact. In terms of the repayment of debt, then as you can see from the new section in 8.7, I think it is, we're projecting a small variation. Now it's important to note there's been two movements. So the first movement is reflecting the decision around ECL, which increased the repayment of debt, and then it's come back down because in the last financial year we didn't borrow as much as anticipated for the capital programme, so the overall position is lower, and therefore the repayment of debt is lower. In terms of borrowing, we have not undertaken any external borrowing this year, and I don't expect us to do so. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Dave. So before I come to the leaders, I'd just like to say this is a paper for noting. I've not had any previous questions advised of me. So if you want to make a point, if you can make that briefly and quickly, if there are any detailed questions, then I'm going to ask you to put them in an email to us, okay? Because this is a matter for noting. We are not making any decisions here on this. Sorry to have to explain it, but I'm trying to keep it focused. Councillor Moore. Councillor Mitchell. Councillor Johnson. There you go. I note your brevity. Sorry, we've got some recommendations there. Can I have a seconder, please? All those in favour, please show.
It's unanimous, Chair. That has
There you
been
go.
carried.
Agenda 12 is now the review of the corporate risk register, and there is a item here that we received the report and propose any actions to help mitigate the risks. Dave.
I got excited then because I thought Ian was going to offer to take it for me, but sadly not. You'll be pleased to know this is the last time you'll hear from me, although I may pop up again in your part 2 conversations. This is the review of the corporate risk register. Second time it's come to the executive. This is the risk register has been reviewed and updated by your senior officers in consultation with their portfolio holders. There are no significant changes, although as highlighted in section 8.8, members of the Audit and Governance Committee asked whether there was a need for a risk around civil emergencies. SMB have considered that request and have requested a paper to consider our approach, and we'll use that to inform whether there is a need for this to be added. I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you very much, David. Councillor Mitchell.
Thank you. What I'm just concerned about is the mechanics of the mechanism of the recommendation. The recommendation is to receive the report is there. The second part of it is to propose any necessary actions. Does that should we expect those actions to be recommended and seen in this report prior to the meeting, or do they arise from this meeting?
Thank you. Councillor Johnson. Councillor Moore.
Thank you. I've got a couple of points, but I just have a procedural question because following on from Councillor Mitchell, is it not the executive's function to be responsible for the risks of delivery of their corporate plan and present to council their findings and reflection on the risk register, and then council to vote on whether it agrees or not. So you're recommending this register to council, but actually maybe this is a decision that you need to be taking, and then council needs to be reflecting on that. Council has a role to hold the executive to account. So I've got a couple of questions on the issues. I'm really pleased to see in terms of delivering net zero, and there's something in the mitigation. However, I perhaps feel that the scrutiny meeting didn't hear much about the proposed actions to tackle net zero for the city. And is the executive confident that they are acting sufficiently on the climate emergency across the city? In relation to council property and assets, I'd like to know how that score has been arrived at in terms of reducing the risk, because the decision to wind down ECL has put council assets potentially at greater risk through a disposal strategy, which will have a significant impact on communities and meeting community needs through the sale of the assets. And just on the last point, around delivering housing and building great neighbourhoods, I see that the Exeter Development Fund is still included as a mitigation, and I'm in need of an explanation of how this is a mitigation to the risk of not being able to deliver that, because there's nothing being reported to the working group or scrutiny committees or executive on the status of that project. Thank you.
Okay. Now open this one up for any discussion. Any member? No? Okay, I'll come back to Councillor Mitchell. The mitigations are in here. That's it. Whether you like them or not, they're in here. I don't like them all, by the way, because I know there's things we've got to do. And as for the process on how we deal for these, thanks for your advice, Councillor Moore. But we've got a process in place, and I rely upon member services and the officers to tell us if we're dealing with things in the appropriate way. And I can assure you that my portfolio owners are reviewing their portfolios constantly on what they're doing. As for the process on how some of these things are achieved, if you can just email me with that question. So I thought that was appropriate when you said, how is this structured, or how do we get to that decision? And I think, Dave, you can then work on get the answer, because I think I would like to see that answer as well. So there it is. We've got it in front of us. The mitigations are included in there. We've got the one recommendation. Can I have a second for that recommendation, please? All those in favour?
That's unanimous, Chair. That has been carried.
Thank you. And now we come on to item 13, which is the review of Article 4 direction and houses in multiple occupancy, the supplementary planning document. And here we have 3 recommendations, which we'll come to. And I think, Ian, you get the chance to have a go now. Ian, if you can talk to the paper.
Thank you, Chair. In actual fact, there are several planning policy items before you this evening, and as I think you will acknowledge, I hope, that considerable amount of work has gone into preparing these really important developments in our planning policy. So rather than myself speaking to the items, I'm allowing George Marshall, who runs the team that's done all of the work, to speak to these items, if that's okay.
Absolutely fine. George.
Thank you, Chair. So this item is in relation to the houses in multiple occupation, supplementary planning document, and the revisions to the Article 4 direction. Together, these 2 policy tools help the City Council manage the impact of HMOs across the city. One in relation to thinking about the implementation of policies relating to the concentration of HMOs, and the other one suspending permitted development rights to enable HMOs to be created. There's been significant work undertaken in relation to these 2 pieces of documentation which fit together, and the 2 sides of the same coin with the same aims. We consulted on revisions to our current HMO SPD alongside revisions proposing to extend our Article 4 area back in the summer. We ran a public consultation with various events and various ways of encouraging people to respond. We had more than 300 responses on the various items. We had 5 options for treating the Article 4 area. One which was a preferred option that was set out as such, which was to expand that area into areas where there are 20% or more student properties. That was set out as the preferred option, and was the option which garnered the most support from consultees responding. We also consulted, as I said, on some minor revisions to the accompanying SPD, which clarified the council's position with regard to how applications for HMOs in that Article 4 area would be treated. And essentially it sets that SPD, as per the consultation, set out that the council would resist further changes to the use of HMOs in that Article 4 area. So implicitly, it's effectively saying that 20% of properties as an HMO was considered to be the higher threshold and an over concentration. We received 76% of support for that reviewed SPD. So those 2 items were consulted on together and set out the proposed approach of the council to HMOs within the city. There are, by way of how the 2 documents get taken forward and implemented, procedurally they're slightly different. So the SPD, which is a planning document, would be taken to council for adoption, and following a decision by council, that could be then used to inform decisions on planning applications. The revision to the Article 4 area, so this expanded Article 4 area, would have to go through a slightly more hands-on set of processes. So subject to council making the decision to, it's called make the direction, we would need to publicise and notify the public about that process. And then following that, a further report would need to go to council to what's called confirm the direction. It's anticipated that might take place in February next year. And following that, there would be a year's grace period until the implementation of the Article 4 direction to avoid claims of compensation across that first year. So the end point would be, subject to various approvals, that the Article 4 direction as revised would be implemented in probably February 2025. And the recommendation set out the processes to get to that stage.
Okay, thank you, George. Councillor Mitchell.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just be brief on this. This is we believe, a small step in the right direction. We personally would have preferred to go further on this, because I think as the university grows across Exeter, and this is the issue at the moment, because the effect is often concentrated in the area where I live and I'm a ward member, but increasingly with the growth of the medical side of the university around the RD&E and Priory ward, and with any movement of any faculty within the city centre in future years, for example, I think this is going to be an issue we will have to revisit again. But I think that it's a small step in the right direction, so thank you.
Okay, Councillor Johnson.
I just wondered about I understand the legal differences between bringing the SPD into effect and having to wait the time for the Article 4. What implications does that have on any planning applications for HMOs? And the fact that there's almost a slight conflict between the two, in a sense, because
the Article 4 isn't yet law, if you like.
Thank you. Councillor Moore.
Thank you very much. This is a move in the right direction, and I welcome the recognition of the issue around imbalance in the local community, or imbalance in the local community, and the point about the threshold is made. But can you just confirm how a balanced community is defined? And previously, Councillor Ballock, I asked you about the basis for the calculation for this, which I thought was very helpful, but it isn't included in this. So I wondered if it could be published and associated with these documents in some way. And just following on from Councillor Mitchell, can you tell us when this policy will be reviewed? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm now going to go, I'll come on to you at the end, and we'll get those, don't deal with those questions, we'll deal with those at the end. Councillor Parkhouse, then Councillor Williams.
Okay, it's working. Yeah, I would like to really thank the officers for the hard work that's gone into this. This is something that's definitely a talking point on the doorstep in Pennsylvania, which is reflected in the fact that more than half of the respondents in the public consultation were from Pennsylvania ward. And yeah, I actually met a lot of those residents at the beginning of my term, and this was something that they, were really wanting to see. And actually, I've had a lot of feedback of those residents that they really appreciate all the effort from the officers that's gone into the review, and impressed by the speed and the scale of the response to residents' concerns, especially given that it's a planning team that have had some other bits and pieces that they've been sorting, not to mention an Exeter plan. So yeah, I think I just want to really comment that has been noted, and the hard work that's gone into it. I'd also like to, I think a lot of people might think that we're sort of superheroes and we can come in and control student numbers and decide where parking is for students and this, that and the other, but actually it's really well laid out the powers that we do have as a council and the powers that we don't have as a council in this report. And I think the option 2 is our preferred option as a council, and the feedback that was clear in the consultation was that this was a reasonable compromise between control and making provision for non-student HMOs, which are also part of this picture. It's not just students that live in HMOs. And then also, that it's a good interim step and the council can monitor and expand it again later, also fed back in that consultation. And I just have one question. So in option 2, it's talking about postcode and output areas of 20% more, but then it also says all which are expected to exceed that threshold in the near future, which sounds like it could be open to interpretation. I just wonder if there is a sort of exact formula for that. Thanks.
Thank you. Do we have Councillor Williams? Then Councillor Wood.
I think Councillor Parkhouse was reading some of my notes, but so I won't repeat everything, but I think Councillor Mitchell was slightly mean in describing it as a small step. I think it's an enormous step. I know that when the residents first put this proposal forward, the leader and the deputy leader met and listened to the residents, but the portfolio holder was sort of sucking in her breath because she knew that the planning team were under enormous pressure because of the new Exeter plan, and we'd just gone through trying to get the GASP through. So huge amount of work, and to take this on and to do it quickly and so thoroughly, I think I just want to congratulate you and thank you, and I hope the residents are very happy with the outcome. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you very much. Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Chair. Just a really quick one. Great report, great outcome. It's not a small step. It's significant, and it's part of a complex range of controls that we bring to bear on these issues and these challenges. And co-living, co-living would help with this, wouldn't it?
Anybody else wish to come in? Councillor Morse.
Firstly, I'd like to say it's a really great example of you asked and we listened. I think a lot of the time we are accused of not listening to the public, or only maybe not listening to the people that shout loudest, because we do listen to a lot of the public. We don't tend to make as much noise. But I'd like to thank Councillor Lights for initially bringing this issue to me, along with Councillor Wright, actually the Deputy Leader, and managing to change my mind, as has already been mentioned, and the leadership and the support of Councillor Snow and Parkhouse during this process, because they have been really helpful getting people engaged with the entire process and ensuring that people did feel they were being listened to. So I'm very, very appreciative of that. Obviously, I'd like to thank George and all his officers, who I now just refer to as the planning policy superstars, because they do appear to be performing miracles with the amount of work they're producing for us and the things that we keep asking of them. And if we could just give them a few months to concentrate on the Exeter plan, I'd be very grateful. I realise there's not a perfect answer to this problem, and opinions will always differ and people will always have different outcomes they would like to see, but I think this is a good, even response to it. And it is based on actual evidence that we have accumulated, not on seeing into the future or some kind of clairvoyancy of a problem that we don't know exists yet. I'm not saying it won't, but we don't know it exists yet. I'm hoping that you'll be able to support this excellent report and vote for the recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor Morse. And again, with regard to that formula, if you can, the opposition can just email with those details, and we'll get those answers back. A lot of questions have been asked, so it may take a day or two to get back to some of them. But just to comment, whereas we did have a preferred option, I think that was a good indication that the planning team here have got their finger on the pulse of what is going on in Exeter, and more importantly, it is exactly what the people who responded to the consultation actually wanted. So whereas we may want to go in different steps in different directions, we have to consult and listen to what the people have told us, and I think they're quite clear. So we've got recommendations there. I'm going to move them. Can I have a seconder, please? All those in favour, please show.
That's unanimous, Chair. That has been carried.
Thank you. And now we're on to agenda item 14, the SIL review, the community infrastructure levy charging schedule. And we've got two recommendations here. I'm going to ask Ian, or is it George? George, you're earning any money tonight. George, to talk us through the paper.
Thank you, Chair. So this relates to the review to the community infrastructure levy charging schedule work that the council has been undertaking for the last couple of years. So council's been charging SIL for about 10 years. We started in December 2013, charging for residential purpose-built student accommodation and out of city centre retail. As we've reported in previous meetings here, there's been significant changes to the property market in those last 10 years, and so a review was due. We, as members will recall, we used consultants Three Dragons to undertake the required viability work, which underpins the proposed revised SIL charges. And as part of that work, we proposed through consultation to increase the rates for purpose-built student accommodation, create a specific rate for co-living, and also introduce a zero rate for build-to-rent and flats on the basis of a lack of viability if we were to charge still the current rates for those types of development. Members will recall that we consulted on a draft of those proposed charging rates within a draft charging schedule at the end of last year into January this year, and then following that, the analysis of the responses to that consultation, we submitted all of that documentation for an independent examination, which took place in July. Subsequently, or rather in July, a set of hearings took place to consider the viability work and the proposed charges and the consultation responses. And subsequently, we've received a report from the examiner, which concludes that the draft charging schedule provides an appropriate basis for the collection of the SIL within Exeter. So the recommendations in the report, which are via executive to council, are in relation to the approval of the draft charging schedule and the implementation of the revised SIL rates in that charging schedule as of January 2024.
Okay. Thank you, George. Councillor Jobson.
Thank you for the work done on this. Sorry, I wanted to look at that. I think I would just comment, I have no questions, that it is a shame that co-living is not being charged at the same rate as purpose-built student accommodation. They are an almost identical feature, and they're being charged at the same rate as build to rent, which is an entirely different feature. And I think an opportunity has been missed there, but that's just a comment. Thank you.
Councillor Moore.
Thank you very much. I'm very pleased that the discount to student developers has now come to an end, because they were building these luxury developments which were extortionate rip-off prices for students. And there is an issue about co-living, because they are very high density for the units as they're described for long-term living. And I am very concerned that the rate proposed is not going to provide the community there that lives in these blocks or the neighbouring residents with the community infrastructure that is needed to enable them to have a good quality of life.
Councillor Mitchell.
Thank you, Chair. I attended the examination with George, and Emma came as well, so we had our day. We had our yes. You.
I was there. I just watched.
Well, you came towards the end, but I was just polite to say you were there. Didn't want to imply you when he popped in later. The presented evidence, and the hearing heard our evidence, took it into account, and agreed with the council's recommendations. My only concern, I just hope the council has got it right. I don't want to see a repeat of the issues that arose with PBSA development. That's all.
Before I go on, I've just got to hang on. He agreed with the council, so these inspectors haven't got a mind of their own. Then they either agree with us or disagree. I think you'll find it was the examiner's decision to make these. We put evidence, you put evidence, and they didn't like your evidence, obviously, or didn't regard it. That's what it's about. And I suppose now we have a situation of which will be recognised by some, that we have a discounted rate for residential properties. And so I'll open it up to the floor now. Anybody wish to have a word on this? Okay, I'll come. Oh, hang on. No. Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Chair. I just looking at the rate per square metre of built on. And I take the point that this SIL will provide the infrastructure necessary for the residence space that this is created. When I look at 136, which is a residential cost per square metre, thinking about some of the developments in Pinhoe, that doesn't produce a large amount of money for the increase in population, because you don't charge for a garden, do you? So there's a lot of space out there that we don't charge for. When you're talking about co-living, the inverse is true, that you're actually charging for almost every single square inch that's in play. So that, for me, will actually produce a greater rate of return per individual than it will than residential housing as it stands. And I think that whilst we're hearing a lot of sound bites about anti-co-living. It comes from people like myself who actually, you know, I'm in a different place in my life. So I'm actually at a point at which I can say, I don't know what's right for people who are in professions and looking to escape mum's back room. I think we're in danger of making judgments from a different place, and I think we should actually listen to professional advice, learn from the experience of other cities, and provide the full range of housing opportunities that residents need. Thank you. Well priced.
Thank you. Anybody else? Councillor Morse.
Not portfolio holder for this charging schedule. First of all, planning policy, yeah, they're brilliant. Woo. It's another thing they did while they were meant to be doing the local plan. Please don't blame me if it doesn't arrive on time. What I wanted to say first of all is I did attend the inquiry to look. I wasn't part of the inquiry because I am no way of an authority on this, and it would have been very poor for me to try and give evidence to it. What I was very impressed with is the leeway that the inspector gave to listen to everybody's opinions, whether they were necessarily appropriate to the still charging schedule, and I think some of it maybe wasn't. He did listen, and actually he's reflected it in the report and has discounted it. You know, it's quite clear in that. So what was also really interesting for me is some of the questions that were asked were questions I may have asked at periods along the way. It was really pleased to hear exactly the same answer in defence of us, so that I wasn't just told something that was incorrect or just shut Emma up. It turns out it is facts, and that's why we had chosen not to do some of the things, because the SIL charging schedule is ridiculously evidence-based. And you can't just go along and go, we'd quite like to do this. They kind of go, well, but why? And actually our officers and the consultants were brilliant. I think I had a really humbling conversation the other week with my 15-year-old. He likes to do that a lot. He's very bright and he's been brought up by a politician. And I was talking about how I didn't really want to live in a tall building, or I liked having a garden, or I didn't like this, or I didn't like that. And we were just having a general planning discussion. And my 14 or 15-year-old son informed me that I wasn't really speaking for everybody, and that my opinion was maybe not necessarily what would be relevant to people under the age of 25, or what he had ambitions of living in before he settled down to live in the suburbs, if he ever did. And I think it's really important that we, you know, it's a bit of what Councillor Wood just said. I really arrogantly thought I knew what people wanted, but I know what people like me want. I don't know what other people want. I don't even reflect on what I might have wanted when I was younger, because I'm 45, I've got a house with a garage and a driveway and a garden, and that's all I want. I'm semi-detached, isn't it great? But it's really arrogant of me to assume that's what everyone else wants. So I think there's real danger in assuming that these things don't provide things, or don't want that, or it's not what people want. And I think maybe we all need to just reflect on being a little bit more humble sometimes.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just think it's really worth noting again, it's been mentioned already, but just to sort of hammer home the point really, that this was set by independent inspectors, examiners who've looked at the proposals, said, yeah, right, well done, Exeter City Council, you've got this right, we support your proposals. You know, that's something that happens on a fairly frequent basis. We're pretty fortunate, we've got a great team of officers who are delivering excellence here in Exeter, backed up by the political decision making behind them. So I think that's worth noting. And there's been a lot of discussion kind of tangentially off there about PBSA, and I think we just need to focus on the fact, I said it earlier, there were 14,000 students before some parties in this room decided to remove the cap on student numbers. There's now 39,000 students in this city. There's been lots of development, absolutely there has, but all that development added together gets nowhere near adding 25,000 bed spaces, which is what we needed to do to keep pace and to keep the city as it was in 2010. So one of the things that's driving up this PBSA cost for the students who come here is a lack of supply. It's basic market economics, which I thought people might be slightly more aware of. If there was a greater supply, the price would come down, it would be more affordable to more people. It's not because of the SIL rate that has been, as I said, independently assessed by experts, examiners and approved. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Fold.
Thank you, Chair. A long time ago, when I
Thank you, Emma.
Well,
A long time ago, before I had a loudspeaker. A long time ago, when I first went to university, I lived in a flea pit. Actually, most people did. Now, I wouldn't recommend that kids live in a flea pit these days, but Diana's right to an extent when she's talking about not luxury, but students are staying in accommodation now that I would have died for in 1972. And the trouble is that gets funded by a bank who knows they're going to get the money back from those people when they start earning lots of money, or from mummy and daddy, or from foreign purses, or wherever. And they don't get to live in that level of accommodation again for a long time afterwards. That's certainly true of 4 of my 5 children who went to university. And I've quoted this before, they all have jobs, but 4 of them can't afford mortgages, but they pay through the nose. And what we need, the whole idea of the co-living, was that it was to stop what I first started seeing as I came up to retirement from headship. More and more young couples going back to live with mum and dad, one or the other, because they couldn't afford a place of their own. Young professionals, hundreds of them now in IKEA, hundreds of them with the NHS, hundreds of them in danger of being part of a brain drain away from Exeter University because there is no accommodation for them. They're all looking for accommodation for young professionals or young couples that is affordable. And I think that is the crux. And co-living isn't perfect, but that's the crux of it, is trying to look at those people, some of whom are transient, some of whom are doing a fantastic job in the NHS and IKEA and other places, some of whom just don't want to be back with mummy and daddy, some of whom we don't want to be part of the brain drain away from Exeter. So let's give co-living a break. A lot of good things about it. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. I'd also like to expand it not just from young professionals, but to the older professional. At the age of 55, I was seconded for 3 years to Milton Keynes. I had to live in an HMO. Yes, I know. If I'd had the choice, I would have gone for co-living. So I think we have to understand that there are all kinds of different people, and I think that we do need to challenge this misleading comments that co-living is the same as PBSA. It isn't. It is completely different. It's much more flexible, and it is for a range of different residents who have different needs.
Thank you. Well, that's been a very interesting debate on co-living. And I'm going to address the matter before us, which is the still charging sections. And one of the things I want to say, although it was a serious discussion, but on that point, everyone's talking, but nobody's listening. Can I say, first of all, thanks again to the team who brought this forward. And for those of you who can remember, way back when I came in and everything else, we wanted to change the schedule, and then there is a process to go through, and it's been very difficult because they didn't have the time to do it. But when I say we made them, we encouraged them to do it. And again, thank you. And also thank you for getting it right again, because if you had got it wrong with the proposals, the inspector might have had something to say. So it wasn't quite the inspector rubber stamping. And I'm going to say this, and I hope we will say this. When you look at the figures going forward, there is not a discount for residential properties. Can we move away from discounts for this and discounts for that? It is purely, this is what the rates are for these appropriate stuff, agreed by the inspector after we put our evidence to it. And I did like what Emma said about the evidence given by a number of people, and that's what it was. And we have to put up sometimes, and not everybody agrees with our submissions sometimes, but that's what it is. So those are the recommendations. In front of us, 2 recommendations. I'm going to move them from the chair. All seconder, please. Councillor Wright. All those in favour?
That's unanimous, Chair. That has been carried.
Thank you very much. We now move to item 15, which is the Livable Exeter Placemaking Charter and Pre-Application Charges. And here you'll see we've got 5 recommendations, and I'm going to,
So
who's
I've given Roger the night off, so I am going to speak to this one.
Ian,
Thank you, Chair.
please, can you talk to them?
I will. Thank you, Chair. Very briefly then. So what the proposals before you tonight are firstly to introduce or to consult on a proposed charge for pre-application advice. That's the first time that has been proposed in this city. It is only for major planning applications. Currently, we offer that service, but it's free of charge. To frame that proposition, we've also brought forward, again for consultation, a new charter which sets out a range of initiatives that we're proposing to improve the way in which we deal with all planning applications across the city, so we can address all of the issues that we know are important that are in the Exeter plan to do with sustainability and design quality. So there's a raft of measures that are set out in that charter. It's all about raising standards of proposals, having better engagement, more collaboration, and ultimately better outcomes for the city that can be delivered through the planning process. So those elements are all framed within what we call the Exeter Design Quality Partnership, and there are 5 elements of those that are in the charter. So there's an independent design review process that's already been set up with our partner Design West, and that's been running for approximately a year. There's also proposals to set out more formally what are called planning performance agreements. These are project management tools that are used to better manage these large scale and complex planning applications. There's the pre-application charges, which there's a set series of rates that are set out there in the report. And then 2 further innovations. We're proposing to set up what we're calling a developers forum. That's to foster more collaboration with the users of the planning service, if you like, so the agents, the developers, the architects, so we can talk to them, speak with them candidly, and understand some of their needs as service recipients. And then finally, because we're always wanting to improve continuously, and we want to learn from some of the decisions that the council's made, we're looking at some outcomes that we can measure through key performance indicators. So there'll be a regime that we'll introduce that we can use as a way of systematically analysing some of the planning decisions that the City Council makes. So we thought it was helpful if we, alongside the proposals for introducing charges for pre-application advice, to set out all of those measures in a document. And again, what we're asking for is approval to consult on that document with a very focused consultation, again, on the users of the service, and then bring back those responses back early next year, hopefully then to approve a final version of the charter and a final version of the pre-application charges, which we can then take back to this committee and then finally to council for approval. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ian. Councillor Moore.
Thank you very much. I welcome the principle of charging for pre-application advice, especially as we've heard many times this evening, the workload of officers and the amount of work that goes into bringing forward these major applications. I just want to pick up a comment I just think I've just heard, which relates to a point that I wish to have clarified. The consultation suggests that only a limited number of groups and stakeholders will be consulted. I wasn't aware that the consultation charter said that consultation should exclude residents, and I think it would be really welcome if residents could have a say on this important document. I do think there needs to be checks and balances. It's on page 180, Councillor Violet. There does need to be checks and balances, and opening to being responded to by residents is a really essential part of that. Partly because residents are very ready to worry about the planning system, and we want to have confidence. I think it's really important that they can examine how the council works with developers, and that should be open to public scrutiny and different perspectives.
Councillor Mitchell.
Thank you, Chair. It's just interesting to I went on to the Plymouth City Council to see what they were doing in regard to that. These ours are simpler. Those goes on 25 pages of charging regime, of which 10 pages are pre-application advice. Because I was concerned about the way you introduce this level of highest work. Is that now standard across authorities? Or are we now working to a newer standard, let's say Plymouth, that have just itemized things on that? And the interesting difference I see, which isn't covered in the report, will the charges vary by the size of development? Small developments are out, but if somebody's building 200 houses against somebody gets 50, is there a scaling built in there in regard to that? Because it seems to be single tiered approaches in regard to this. And secondly, have you any indication of any anticipated income? Have you done any ballpark figures on the sort of income you cover here, and will it cover your costs?
Okay, thank you. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you. I largely support these recommendations. I think it's overdue that there's pre-planning application, and look forward to seeing this further fleshed out.
Thank you. Then move to other members of the committee. Councillor Wright.
Thank you. Totally welcoming this. Just want to draw attention to page 187, 8.24 about the measuring outcomes, which is to be a new thing. The new commitment to measure outcomes of completed developments against key social, economic, environmental performance indicators. Hurrah! That's really good. But that's extra work. That'll be quite a lot of work. And then what we do with that data, obviously, will then come back again to look at that. But I think that's a huge stride forward to do that. That is quite a commitment. So just want to say yes to that. That's great.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else?
Like all good parents, all good portfolio holders must love all of their teams as much as each other. So I'd like to say thank you to the development management team who worked primarily on this. Roger Crotworthy has led on it, not just so that we could draw up this document, but also the commitment that if we're going to charge people for something, we have to believe we can provide it, and to have worked with each other to discover whether we could do that, and look at all of our information. It is anticipated that it pays for itself, and other than that, I don't think we really know till we get running what the long-term impact of it is. I think it's something we've talked about actually for years on and off, and that's why I'm really grateful to this team to be in a position that, we did say that the other half of the team have been super busy. The DM team are always super busy. They're always dealing with whatever's coming in, whether that's large or small applications. But in the case of large applications, it's appropriate that we charge for them. And actually, I think the service that we offer as a result will be better to those developers. And also from the point of view of the local people who I represent, that the outcome of what is built and the development they see should be of much better quality because of much more partnership working right at the beginning, rather than this is what we've got, this is the end. When you're paying for something, you want to listen to those conversations. So again, commend this application.
Thank you. On those questions, you need to write them in, because I think it's very important to understand that who's being charged, because I wouldn't expect to pay the same as perhaps a massive development for my little lean-to, if you know, that I want to put up. So I feel sure there is how they would deal with it, but it is interesting that we get to know how it is. So I feel we'll wait for your question if you email to us. So we've got the recommendations there. We'll move them from the chair. Can I have a seconder, please? All those in favour?
That's unanimous, Chair. That has been carried.
Okay, thank you very much. We now move on to item 16, which is East Devon, Exeter, Mid Devon and Cambridge joint strategy approval. I would have tried to have got it into 4 letters myself. For us all, we've got a recommendation there. Is this Ian or is it George? George, can you talk to the paper, please?
Thank you, Chair. This paper relates to a joint strategy which the City Council has been collaborating with our neighbouring authorities on, called our shared coordinates. So perhaps explaining what this might be quite helpful. So in formal planning terms, the Council is focusing most of our efforts on the new Exeter plan. So this Exeter plan will provide the formal planning policy for the City Council, and that's rightly the primary decision-making document which the Council will have in future once that's adopted. The other local authorities are also preparing their own local plans on a similar timescale. However, in formal terms, there is a need to collaborate, and this document is a start point for that. It's a non-statutory document which covers and shows the functional linkages across the wider area and shows how the councils and the county council are working together on a series of shared coordinates, these shared issues. And indeed, that's actually a really important element of the work because it supports our duty to cooperate on plan making, on the Exeter plan. So the document demonstrates a joined up strategy across the area. It shows the benefits of working together. It demonstrates this duty to cooperate, which is a key part of producing our Exeter plan, and it in future would act as a prospectus to support funding bids for the infrastructure, some of which is listed in broad terms towards the back of the document. The shared coordinates are net zero, quality places, jobs and prosperity, nature, homes and connectivity. And so they link together through this cross-cutting topic of infrastructure delivery. And there's the infrastructure list, which I've mentioned towards the back of the document. The councils have been working collaboratively on this for some time. We've also run some informal consultation with stakeholders, and the responses we've had to that consultation have been provided with reports this evening. And the work going forward, I should say, the recommendation is in relation to approving this. But I ought to just say again that in terms of in policy terms, this is an informal document, and it doesn't form part of the development plan. That, as I said at the top, is the role and the job of the Exeter plan, which we've spoken to before.
Okay, thank you, George. Councillor Moore.
Thank you very much. Well, it's interesting to read this document. It's all very high level. It has mention to net zero. I couldn't find out the little star that was next to it what that actually referred to in the document. It didn't seem to relate. So is that net zero 2030, 2050 or some other time? I was concerned that in the section around climate change, there were some quite interesting suggestions that included, particularly around the Marsh Barton incinerator, which we know is the single highest emitter of CO2 in the city, the district heating system in Cranbrook, which I have had confirmed to me is very high emitter of CO2. It's now going to be converted to becoming energy from waste plant. So, and then we've got the the trialling of low carbon flights, which I learned today are also going to be vegan. So that should help make people very happy. So, I think we need to have some quite serious inclusions of measures that we're looking to move towards being net zero, because I'm afraid that really doesn't do it for me. So, and just in relation to the infrastructure list, so you're confirming that this infrastructure list doesn't have implications for the infrastructure list that we are discussing later on, and we won't be required to, because these are very vague proposals.
Okay, Councillor Mitchell.
Thank you. There's a lot of valuable statements in there that none of us would disagree with. It's talking about the centricity effectively of Exeter within this sub-region and the way we relate to other local authorities, and we share similar aims in planning issues. What I'd like to know from George, in what context would planning officers in this authority or other authorities or members refer to this document, as it's not statutory and not a policy document? How will we use it?
Councillor Johnson.
I welcome the document. I just hope it isn't be welcome to the other two authorities.
Perhaps Councillor Mitchell can have some influence on that. Okay, can I open it up to discussion? Anybody want to say? Councillor Williams.
Well, yes, a very, very important document. To say, I really don't feel though that, well, I didn't until I looked at the definition of coordinates on Google just now. But I thought, oh, I'm not sure about the title. Our shared coordinates. It doesn't for me. You've got to read the small print to see that you've got these different authorities. But I think it's worth reading out the definition of coordinates, bring the different elements of complex activity or organisation into harmonious or efficient relationship. So I think possibly you worked very hard on getting that title, I know, and maybe I do agree with it now, but it's it's a tough one.
Anybody else? Councillor Pearce and Councillor Wood coming at the end.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I mean, there's been some mention of net zero, so I just hope that this joint strategy between all the councils will bring our neighbours to the table and get them to up their game. Exeter City Council was recently independently assessed as being the second best district council in the country in terms of its progress towards net zero, something that should be an aspirational measure for our neighbours. And if we're going to work on our shared coordinates together, hopefully they can improve their game too. And Councillor Mitchell maybe can have some influence, as you suggested previously.
Thank you. Councillor Wood.
Thank you. It's just to address some of those sound bites that we keep getting presented with as if they're facts. The single largest emitter of CO2 in the city, that is correct. That is correct. But it is waste to energy plant. And the alternative is landfill. And it's generally accepted that the CO2 that's produced via the filtering system of the waste to energy plant is much preferable to the mixed emissions that would come from landfill. We are zero to landfill in our city, and I think we should be proud of it. Yes, a lot of CO2 comes out of that, but so does a lot of energy. And I just...
Thank you. You're not members of the club. Anyway, it's like a member of the public showing the point of order. I'm not having it. Committee, so that's the end of it. So, Councillor, any other Councillor Morse?
So first of all, I think officers put some effort into this, but I would like to say elected members worked really hard for a really long time to get to this. And Bill, on the impact of the guest and the fallout of the guest, I have to support Councillor Mitchell and hope that the same outcome comes from every local authority. But this is a very different document. It's not policy binding. We won't sit in planning committees and go, this document such and such is what we're working to, because our local plan and national planning guidance is what we work to always within and other material considerations. I don't believe this document becomes a material consideration. But it's a really important of our duty to cooperate, and we do have a duty to cooperate. And at times we may not want to cooperate, and I'm sure officers here will mention to answer that to you in private when I might not be that cooperative. But this document is about shared ideas, shared coordinates. That name did take a very long time to come up with, so we must appreciate it. It is about things we have in common, because if the guest taught us anything, we don't have everything in common. So maybe we just need to admire the bits that we do. So it's a good document. It will be useful, I'm sure, moving forward when we look at those sort of things. And hopefully, if the government feel like giving out any money, it might assist us along the way too.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? So as Councillor Wright.
I'm very sorry. I'm pleased to see him here.
If you apologise once more, I won't take it.
I'm very sorry for apologising, and I'm not stopping. Yeah, I'm really pleased that this is a vehicle again for discussion of cross-boundary cooperation for ideas revision, because it's something that people can let in go, and we're trying through the guests to do it, and conversations went round, and so there's no this kind of thing. I need to stop that circular thing, and so this is good. It's another way of approaching shared aims. So this is good.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. I mean, this document is an example of you don't always get your own way in life. And we didn't get our own way. We passed the guest through this executive and this council. We wanted to take it on. We were the only authority who wanted to. And that was to provide homes for people in the greater Exeter area. It is sad that some of our friends in some of the others have an issue with the name. It's sad. But we had to deal with that. If that was the only thing we had to worry about. And so I believe, and I'll say it again now, we missed an opportunity, a big opportunity, because now we still have to deal with those piecemeal. So this was a duty to cooperate, and very keen to do that. And it was to keep all those authorities together, because they are all sitting on our boundaries. They do have an impact on Exeter. We need to be working in cooperation with these other ones. And so now this has gone through, and when it talks about options, any other options, I would say it's more than just to tick that box of duty to cooperate. And there will be occasions of which, through various forums, for example, the Devon Leaders Forum, which I'm going to mention it on Friday, and I think you've been asked to come along, Ian, you've been nominated to come with me on this. I will ask the question, how are we collectively going to regard this document going forward? Because there are some issues that we need to discuss if we are. So don't talk to me about devolution. Don't talk to me about all that stuff if we can't get an advisory document agreed between us and going through between us. So I'm not sure, are we the first ones to go? We're not the first ones. Well, that's something then. And others have agreed it already. Others have agreed it, have they?
Teambridge approved it this morning.
Oh, well done. Good. So we're just behind Teambridge, and I hope for the others, because it's quite important. But it is what it is. It's not what we would have wanted. Okay. So on that, we've got the recommendations in front of us. I'm going to formally move it. Can I have a second, please? All those in favour?
That's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you. Now move on to item 17. Which is the annual infrastructure funding statement. And we've got two recommendations there. George. Is it George? Have I got it right? George. I am. Oh. George, if you can talk to the recommendations.
Last instalment from me this evening. So this is in relation to the annual infrastructure funding statement, which is part of our SIL and Section 106 and the wider infrastructure monitoring process that we have at the council. So there's a government requirement to publish an annual infrastructure funding statement, and this is the statement covering financial year 2022 to 23. It includes information relating to SIL and Section 106 receipts, commitments and expenditure, and at the end includes an infrastructure list, which hasn't changed actually from the previous year's list, but that sets the strategic direction and the way in which we could spend SIL to deliver the development strategy for the city, focusing on sites within the emerging Exeter plan, but also have a number of other thematic topics, such as green infrastructure, net zero, and city centre infrastructure. There's a few key figures within the report. I won't go over all of them, but just a couple of key ones which set out the importance of funding that comes forward through development. So within the monitoring year, which as I said is 2022 to 23, council received approximately 3.1 million of SIL receipts and spent 4.64. So that demonstrates the importance of SIL within the city. And likewise, in relation to Section 106, which runs parallel alongside SIL, the value of 106 we received in 2022-23, approximately 2.2 million, spent 1.34, and in relation to affordable housing in particular, 146 units of affordable housing secured through the Section 106 agreements which were signed in that year. There's a host of other information within the reporting, but that is a summary of some of those key points. The recommendation is the executive agrees the content of the statement, and then the publishing on the website.
Okay, thank you, George. Councillor Jobson.
All I would hope is that when it comes to the infrastructure list, that the little element right at the end concerning the parks and play areas will be given slightly more priority than bullet point 6 at the bottom. Let's put it that way.
Okay, thanks. Councillor Moore.
Thank you very much, and it's good to see all the things that has Section 106 and SIL is spent on, because there's a lot of important stuff there happening in the city. It's interesting the note about the highways and such like says refer to DCC Highway Authority reporting, so then we can't see how much SIL has contributed towards that. So that would be helpful very much to see. It would also be very helpful if members in the relevant ward could be involved in decisions about how Section 106 and SIL is spent in that ward, because that doesn't happen at the moment. And with regards to the infrastructure list, it is quite clear from the list how much infrastructure is going to be required in St David's. Now, in this list, it prioritises cycling bridge over the canal. I'm surprised it doesn't include the inclusion of Mallison Bridge.
I had to get it in.
Councillor Mitchell.
Keep on saying a bridge too far. And that was a good film as well. All right. The only question for George is in regard to the infrastructure wish list at the end. How often is that reviewed, and our initial costings done in it that then are reviewed so that members or decisions are made about the implementation of that, or do they await until money is available? I'm uncertain the process of how it operates. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to open this now up for a discussion amongst the members. Any members wish to say anything? Councillor Morse.
Not only does George have to speak on everything, I feel like I have to as well, because actually this is under the portfolio of the leader, but obviously sometimes lines get blurred and they belong to both of us. I think the really important thing about SIL is, first of all, you can't spend it until you have it. So you can, in theory, spend it, but if it doesn't exist, you can't spend it at all. So this list is all well and good, but we can't spend it until we have the money. And on that note, you can't obtain SIL or 106 for an area if you don't allow development at some point in it.
Okay, anybody else? Okay, just to say, I need reminding what's my responsibility and whatnot. I observed that remark about the Devon County and what was that would be interesting. I'll find out whether or not that is a required provision or this report is done what the report has to do. It may be that that's all the report has to do. That's all we're required to do. If it is, that's all we're required to do. I'm going to ask you to find out anyway, because I think it is quite an important matter. As for involving ward councillors, it sounds terribly bad to say no, because we've got a process in place which deals with it. As for the list as such and the bullet points, that is in no particular order. Okay, is what I would say to you. But if it helps next year when we bring it back, I'll stick it to the top. And then you'll be able to see that you've made that difference. But it's in no order. We deal with things that we need to deal with, and that is we prioritise them. It's in accordance with the corporate strategy, I have to say, with the manifesto of the ruling group as well, on what we deliver. And that is our policy, and that is what we determine, and that's what we will determine going forward. So on the basis of that, now, I'm not sure, is it Mark will advise me on this, is because I don't believe we're necessarily required to take this matter to full council. However, I am saying we are going to take it to full council as a recommendation. And if you remember what Bethany Evans said of the things, we take rather a lot as a local authority, which is appropriate because it is transparent that way and giving all members the right to vote for or against something. So with those recommendations, can I have a seconder, please? All those in favour?
So unanimous, Chair, that has been carried.
Thank you very much. So we can now move on to item 18, and we'll take this item and then I will have just a quick 5 minutes before we go into the part 2 for people of a certain age, what we need to do at various times. So item 18, public access to images of RAM collections. And have we got any Elgin marbles? Okay, over to you.
Thanks very much. This report really boils down to interpretation of copyright law. As you're probably aware, generally 70 years after the death of an artist or an author, works go into the public domain. So for a museum collection like RAM's, the majority of our works are 18th and 19th century or late or earlier, and therefore they're within the public domain, while much of the 20th century art is under copyright. The issue is if public domain works are copied and scanned and put online with digital versions, are these then protected by a new copyright? So this has been something that's kind of exercised people for a while. And in 2015, the UK Intellectual Property Office decided, and I paraphrase, it's unlikely that a digitized image can be considered as original, as there is minimal scope for creativity. In other words, IPO's feeling was that digital versions of public domain works should not be under copyright. But the IPO guidance didn't really, it's not legally binding, so interpretation of how the law is interpreted has kind of varied between organisations. But in recent years, there's been a real growing support for the idea of releasing images open access, so releasing images free of copyright. And a lot of the funding research councils, for example, working with the university and indeed National Lottery Heritage Fund, they are now insisting or asking that institutions release works as copyright free. And indeed, at the same time, large international museums, libraries, collections are releasing images open access. So the Smithsonian, for example, has released many images, the Rijksmuseum. So since autumn 2022, we've been working as part of a fully funded project with the University of Exeter Law School on developing an appropriate policy direction for us to take. at RAM. So we trialled a release of 60 odd images, medium resolution images, into the public domain. This was via Wikimedia Commons. If you're familiar with Wikimedia Commons, that's the way that people populate their Wikipedia pages. So the figures are really impressive. So the images that we released were used in around 60 Wikipedia pages and been viewed 4.7 million times. So in terms of public access, this is a fantastically powerful tool. And one of the impacts of open access within the sort of museum, library, archive sector generally is that income from image licensing, in other words, the sale of public domain works, is really going down. Not surprisingly, people are finding images either freely available or very similar images. So why would you pay for one that you could get for free? So for RAM, our proposal really and our recommendations tonight are a two-tiered approach, so that we have medium resolution images of two-dimensional works of art that are in public domain, which will release free of copyright for general use. Most typically, this would be for kind of students or school kids working on projects or local history researchers who want images for their work, and that we reserve high resolution images for commercial activity so that they remain available for licensing through fees and charges. We've got revised fees and charges for even the report. We see this approach as really kind of combining hopefully the best of both worlds. So we get really good public access, good reach, good way of getting images of Exeter out into the Wikipedia and through research and publicity and media, but also protects those assets that we deem to have a commercial value that we can use. So that's the recommendations.
Thank you, Julian. Councillor Mitchell.
Just one question, during clarification. When people apply, obviously, is there a difference? How do people apply? How do you distinguish between those who are taking it for personal use and commercial use? Because could it be that the personal use material ends up in a commercial usage and you're not getting no revenue from it?
Okay, thank you. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you very much.
Okay, Councillor Moore.
It seems like a good idea, I think, for your hard work.
Okay, I'm going to open this up now to the floor. Any remarks? No? Okay, well, I'll come to you at the start then. Councillor Wright.
Grab this one. So I put the other one in the cupboard because it was annoying me. Yes, I'll be quick because it's a long meeting, but huge thanks to Julian and other officers for what they've done there. And it's very impressive. The GLAM E-Lab, which I love the sound of that. It's not quite what I thought it might be, but it's really good the work that's going on with the university and with RAM sort of leading the way. And this is really good work, and it's good because we have to comply with the law, obviously, but also, as you've explained, have then to comply with something that doesn't seem to comply with the law. So it's really good work. You've done really well with that. Thank you very much. And just want to point out to Dave, because that even though there's a sort of predicted, there might be a reduction in a small income of £2,378, £1,500 of that was what the council was paying the council into RAM. So that will be something that comes back into the comms budget now, which will make things look really good, won't it? Thank you.
It's not 22 million, is it? So nobody else? If you can answer that question quickly. Sorry, Julie, can you? No, you were asking about the financial one. Okay.
I was being facetious. It's only not it.
So the medium resolution images aren't suitable for commercial use. So our major commercial use is reproduction, either as kind of poster or as merchandising, just an object on loads of the British Museum, which was used in merchandising, has been quite lucrative for us. But the images that we'll be releasing open access just wouldn't be used for that. They're just not, the resolution is not good enough for that use.
All right, thank you, Julian. Thank you very much, Julian. And I was going to apologise for leaving you right to the end, but But I know you're going to say, I've enjoyed the meeting so much. And you've looked at the date of the next one, because you're going to come along, right? I know you are. Okay, so I've got these 5 recommendations. I'd like a seconder, please. All those in favour?
That's unanimous, Chair. That has been carried.
Thank you. I'm just going to move a motion now that we move into part 2. Can I have a seconder, please? All those in favour?
That's unanimous, Chair. We have now moved into part 2.
Okay, take 5 minutes, everybody.